Thank you for listening to this fantastic show on the Crawlspace Media Network.
We want to talk to you about another show on the Crawlspace Media Network.
You got to subscribe to Crawlspace. Crawlspace is a true crime and mystery podcast hosted by the creators of Missing Maura Murray, which happens to be us.
That's right, Tim. It's you and I. We also host Crawlspace. It runs the gamut of the true crime genre, and we try to apply our deep dive investigative techniques into cold cases and missing person cases like Brianna Maitland, Brandon Lawson. We also discuss the mystery of Suitcase Jane Doe, the Colonial Parkway murders, and a number of other cold cases, mysteries, and just strange occurrences.
And we also converse with experts in the field of criminal psychology, law enforcement, and crime media. Want to know how to catch a liar? Or what it's like to wear a wire and get a confession from a juror in your son's wrongful murder conviction?
Crawlspace has it. Want to know what it's like to escape a serial killer just by happenstance? We got that too. So go ahead and check out Crawlspace, subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app right now. There's no reason to wait. Do it now. Now.
You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group, together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And we are pleased to bring you this week part 2 of our conversation with Lisa Zambetti, co-host of Real Crime Profile, Killer Casting, and the casting director for the hit CBS series Criminal Minds.
Oh, and a foster parent to dog Buddy, who shows up in the podcast.
Yes. We loved having Buddy join us. He was a wonderful addition.
He was, and I sort of forgot until I was working on the edit that Buddy figures prominently in the last part of the podcast. Do you think Lisa will keep him, or?
I know she is still fostering him right at the moment.
Oh, she is, and her sons probably love it because
Yes.
Buddy seemed like a really sweet dog.
Yeah, I'm so psyched that Buddy has a nice home for right now.
Absolutely. A great place to be for Christmas.
We always look forward to sitting down and talking with Lisa, and this is a particularly upbeat and funny conversation, especially for those of you that are Criminal Minds fans like I am. You'll get some nice tidbits of behind-the-scenes information.
I thought the two of you were going to do a really deep dive on some actors and casting choices. The thing I'm always amazed by, Kristin, is when we're talking to one of our friends who works in film and television, you're always like, oh, yeah, and you know the names of the episodes. Oh, yeah, that's from Clock Strikes 12. And I'm sitting there going, what?
I've invested a lot of time and energy watching CSI and Criminal Minds over and over and over and over again.
True enough, but I'm not even sure most fans know the names of the episodes.
I'm blessed with a very, very good memory and a very vivid imagination. So put the two of them together and you've got a fangirl like me.
I was waiting for obsessive personality, but you didn't mention it.
Nope. Well, I have that too. I think we all know that at this point.
In other true crime news, we got the word a couple of weeks ago from our friends at Othram Labs that they were closing in on the identity of a man who's referred to as Ben Bellamy, sometimes Denim, his nickname, and Mostly Harmless, also a trail nickname from when he was hiking on the Appalachian Trail. You may recall that this man had died of natural causes. He wasn't murdered. He was found dead in Florida, and people have been trying to figure out his identity for quite some time now. Mm-hmm. The Collier County, Florida Sheriff's Department, in partnership with Othram Labs, has been working to identify this man. And a lot of people have become very invested in this man's story and his identity. We understand the part about seeing someone pass away without ever actually knowing his real name. One thing that's been a little bit strange now in the past few days is that apparently Othram's research with the Collier County Sheriff's Department has identified this man. A few weeks ago, Othram said he was from Louisiana and that they were narrowing down their search. Additional work was done, and apparently they have figured out his name. However, at this point, they haven't announced what his name might be, pending notification to his family. And apparently he was somewhat estranged from his family, so he might have gone quite some time without being in contact. The one disturbing aspect of this story is that some folks in the true crime community who've gotten, I think, a little ahead of themselves have taken it upon themselves to contact potential family members of this man to ask them or even inform them about his status, which both Kristin and I found very disturbing.
We understand that the intention behind it is most likely well-meaning, but that is not the job of interested civilian parties to do. That is the job of law enforcement. It's upsetting to think that a family member who has lost a loved one, even if they have not realized it yet, would end up being blindsided by someone who felt the need to come up to them either online or in person, probably online at this point, and inform them, hey, did you know that your son, nephew, relative died in Florida and is just now being identified? That's got to be an awful shock. It was very upsetting to me when you told me about that earlier today, Bill, that people have, as you said, gotten ahead of themselves and taken it upon themselves to notify the family. That is not the job of true crime enthusiasts. That is the job of law enforcement.
We're both true crime enthusiasts ourselves. We started this podcast as a way of expressing our interest in this field. Obviously, I've been touched by losing a loved one. But as Kristin said this morning when we were talking about this offline, what a horrible way to find out that your loved one had died alone in a tent in Florida without being identified. It's not the way it needs to be done. And I think we have to respect the wishes of the Collier County Sheriff's Department, let them do their job, nail down the details. Of course, they're going to inform the loved ones of this man. At the end of this whole process, there are family members who've lost loved ones. In a situation like Ben Billamy, mostly harmless, I think we need to be a little bit more careful and respectful.
Yeah, respectful, I think, is really the key word there, Bill. And I have always tried to be very careful and respectful of you and all the other family members, which is why even if I have had a ton of questions that I have wanted to ask, there are still things I haven't asked you because I don't necessarily feel it's appropriate. And it's not something that I don't want to overstep. I think it's important for people who are interested in a case and involved in a case and passionate about a case to remember that there really are times where you can overstep. And it's just really important to be respectful of the people who have lost a loved one and to keep in mind that this person, as interesting as their case is to you, there are still people who knew them and loved them and whose feelings are very, very much need to be taken into consideration.
Well said. We just wanted to close out here by thanking everyone for your support of Mind Over Murder. We continue to receive outstanding reviews, and I know Kristin laughs at me when I want to do this, but we wanted to thank a couple of people who wrote some really, really nice things on Apple Podcasts this week. PW from GR writes, 5 stars, I love it, serious, interesting, great guests, very professional. I guess we'll take that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And In Hampton Roads via Apple Podcasts writes, 5 stars. You were probably the first podcasters to cover the Heidi Childs, David Metzler murders. For some reason or another, the majority stray away from the case. Good research, too. This got me hooked from the beginning. Well, thank you.
That is so nice to hear. We really try to take the time to do the best that we can with our research process, and we try to always make sure that this is a well-researched podcast. So thank you guys very much. We do appreciate every time that you take a moment to leave us a rating or a review. And we appreciate the times that you interact with us on our social media pages. So please do keep that up. We really appreciate it. We love interacting with our listeners.
We realized something, which is this is episode 48. We don't reference our podcast very often by number, but we release one podcast a week every Monday morning. We're just a few weeks away from our first anniversary, which is kind of exciting.
It really is. I know that for many people, 2020 has been the equivalent of a dumpster fire.
You can say that again.
Yeah, but for us, 2020 is always going to be the year that we launched our podcast. And even though it has been a very challenging year in a lot of ways for a lot of people, like as a teacher, this has been the most challenging year of my teaching career. But so much good for us personally and professionally has come out of this year that I can't look at 2020 as a total loss. It's not something that I want to throw away, because this has been a really great year and we have enjoyed growing our podcast and learning and improving as we go along. So 2020 dumpster fire, yes, but utterly forgettable. No, some good stuff did come out of it.
Well, on that note, I think we should wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays. What else are we missing there? There's a whole bunch more.
Joyous Festivus for the rest of us.
This is true. A blessed Kwanzaa. I'm sure I'm forgetting, 6 or 8 other major holidays, but I think if we say thank you and happy holidays and a very happy new year, 2021 will be upon us, and perfectly happy to leave some aspects of 2020, say like the pandemic, in the rearview mirror and have a wonderful new year all the way around.
Thank you so much for listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll see you soon. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And joining us again is Lisa Zambetti, casting director from Criminal Minds, co-host of Real Crime Profile, and co-host of Killer Casting. Thanks for joining us again, Lisa.
Oh my God, it is my pleasure. The more time I can spend with you, the better. I've missed you both so much. And it's so funny because, the true crime genre is really a family. I mean, you start to meet people. We were just talking off microphone about our friend Gemma Hoskins, who I was such a fan of in The Keepers. And I had the privilege of meeting her at a crime con a couple years ago. And she's become my badass fairy godmother. And, meeting you, Kristin, and Bill, of course, is my love. It's just great to be with you and to connect. And we can't be in person, but someday, hopefully, I will travel to where Bill is and stay in his B&B and
we were
enjoy that.
We were discussing the fact that this is really fun for the three of us to be together. And then someday we'll do this in person again.
Yes.
And I feel the same way with my own family. I was talking to my brothers today. Hopefully things will settle down and we'll be able to see each other in person.
Well, so last episode, you told us a lot about your life on Criminal Minds and on Real Crime Profile, but we definitely want to highlight your new podcast, which is called Killer Casting. So what prompted you to create Killer Casting?
Oh my goodness. So our fans from I almost said Criminal Minds, our fans from Real Crime Profile really prompted this because, as I was saying last episode, we mostly cover very tragic cases on Real Crime Profile, but every once in a while we will cover a television show or a documentary or a film or something like that. And my only expertise is talking about production values. And as we talked about before, acting is the study of being human. And so I study that very closely. I study how actors speak, how they behave, what they wear, what's in the background, what objects they use, what color the objects are. Mm-hmm. And I started deep diving that when we were covering Mindhunter and Escape at Dannemora and OJ versus whatever. And our fans, at least some of them, really loved that. And they spotlighted that to me. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad somebody gets that, that somebody is as interested in that weird detail, and of course, all of my colleagues in the entertainment industry, we can talk about this all day long. We could talk about all these kinds of choices all day long. and all the thought that goes into everything you see in a production. That is a thought, that is a design, that is a choice, or a not a choice, or something that was disregarded, or something that was not attended to. And I can only talk about that with the very inside baseball people in my life. But when I realized that our listeners actually loved that, I was breaking down the wallpaper and the pattern in somebody's blouse as significant, I realized the beauty of podcasting, and you guys know this, whatever niche you're interested in, like if you love pickles, there's going to be a podcast about pickles, whatever you love. You don't have to worry about the network giving you your ratings numbers every week and worrying, am I going to be taken off the air? Am I going to only get, 20 episodes this season? With a podcast, you are you, and you can be you and all the crazy, weird, idiosyncratic things that make you special. And I thought, well, there's nobody weirder than me. So why don't I just do a podcast with two of my favorite people in the world who have, and I cast this podcast very well, I must say, because I cast it with a Texan and an Australian who have very different voices than me. And so I created Killer Casting, and it's all about, well, it's kind of a pun because I cast killers on Criminal Minds for 7 years. So I know how to cast the out of a killer, I'll tell you. I can do it. I can spot them. I can eke it out of any actor. But anyway, so I started this podcast where we can talk about films, TV, documentaries that we are passionate about. And there's so much out there, Bill and Kristin, as you know, there's too much out there. You can't see it all.
There's so much.
And you really need to be guided towards the things that you should see, that you shouldn't overlook, that even if you've never heard of it, you should watch it. Or even if you have heard of it, it's worth the hype. So I got my two buddies, Brian and Dean, to jump on this podcast with me and to make it, again, it's like we said before, I have a barn, you can make the costumes, you can make this, and it's a very homegrown, homespun podcast where Dean's wife made our incredible artwork. Dean's friend did the music. Anyways, and we just showed up and we talked about this amazing show that a lot of people haven't heard of. It's an Australian show called Mr. In Between. And we broke it down. We broke down why it's a great show. And I don't care if anybody listens to it or not. I don't need to care about that. I just have a venue, a forum for what I need to talk about and who I need to amplify and who I want to uplift and give credit to. I have a favorite podcast that I listen to called The Watch. It's a Ringer podcast. And it's the same thing. It's just these two guys who've been friends forever who talk about whatever show they want to talk about. And I love it. And sometimes it's shows that I don't watch, but I love hearing them talk about the shows. And sometimes it is like Game of Thrones. They'll cover Game of Thrones and why it's so special. Specifically why. Break apart the elements that a layperson might not know. And so on my show, it's so funny because in contrast to Real Crime Profile, so I'm the expert, right?
That's right.
I am the expert on my show. And Dean he's a Real Crime Profile fan. That's how I met him. He's a longtime listener, but he's a TV buff. He's fantastic. He's a fan. And Brian was my assistant and now has worked on many other shows, and so we all kind of have different points of view, and it's so fun.
Dean kind of takes on the role you have on Real Crime Profile in that he is a bit more of the civilian. I'm not taking anything away from him when I say that.
Absolutely.
But it's sort of like the role that you perform on Real Crime Profile where he kind of steps in a little bit for the audience, and the other two people, in this case, are experts on casting and production choices.
Exactly. And we need that because if Brian and I were talking, we would be talking about things that nobody can understand because we're so inside.
A little too wonky.
Yeah. He's offer only. He's this, he's this, he's this. And Dean is like,
what does that mean?
Me? But also he just brings us a very fresh perspective and audience's perspective. And we need that.
Well, and the thing is, what's really cool about this conversation with the three of you is you're talking about art forms, film and television, that are accessible to all of us. And heck, actually, with COVID, we are watching more TV and online entertainment than ever before. Yep. But the expertise that you bring to analyzing actors and a production and the decisions that were made can add to our enjoyment of the show. In other words, there are things that you could go back and watch, like a cool series like Game of Thrones, and maybe watch the show. I made a note the other day when you mentioned Mr. In Between. I haven't seen the show yet, but I made a note to say that if you think that's a worthwhile show, and, you know, I know what an expert you are, then that means I'm going to make time to watch it. No, it's like a couple of weeks ago, The Queen's Gambit. A lot of people whose opinion...
I have to watch that. I have to watch that now. Yes,
well, a lot of people, actors, producers, and other people whose opinions I totally respected. It's not a true crime show, not at all. But both Pamela, my partner, and I were hearing, oh, we got to check out the show, The Queen's Gambit, because the buzz was beginning to build, but it was beginning to build among people that worked in film and TV whose opinions I really respected. Much in the same way, if the three of you think we're going to devote time on our new Killer Casting podcast to talk about this show, Mr. In Between, I put an asterisk next to that because that means that's something really cool that you guys are talking about. I'm going to go check that out.
Right. Nobody does, yeah.
But the subtleties that you guys talk about can add to our enjoyment of this art form that's, you know, popular and available to all of us.
And there is just so much on anymore, you know, that you get a little bit of guidance in terms of like, what is it that's good, what is interesting, what is well crafted, because you kind of get overwhelmed or it's like, okay, well, there's these 17 things. Which one should I be looking at? I don't know. Yeah, it's great.
Right. And what we hope is to describe it in a way like you can be like, I love listening to you talk about it, but it's not the show for me. Or, you know, I get it. And it's funny because we're not all going to agree on everything. You know, Brian and I have very strong opinions about certain things, and we love talking about that. But the other thing is that you can listen to our show. This is what we're in the very nascent beginnings of our show, and I'm trying to figure this out. I don't want to spoil a show.
Sure.
You know, for somebody who hasn't seen it, I don't want to spoil it with the major events, but I do want to take it apart. So we're really trying to figure out like how much of a show to divulge. You know, if you've seen it, then you do want to go through every scene. You do want to relive every moment. So that's something. So once again, you figure out your podcast as you go along, right? Mm-hmm. So like the next thing we're going to cover is Fargo season 4. Okay. Now, I've never seen Fargo season 1, 2, or 3.
Oh, and I love the movie, but I've never seen the show.
Right. Oh, me too. Oh my God, it's one of my favorite movies. So we've started Fargo 4, which I think is a standalone. I think the way that the series is structured, you can watch. I mean, I don't feel like I'm missing anything starting with season 4. And Brian has watched all of the seasons. And so he's going to have a big, thing to say about it. But there are certain things that I don't want to spoil, for the audience who hasn't watched it. So that is a very interesting thing to try to negotiate and make the podcast interesting for everybody,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyway,
you end up with like a spoiler alert almost because you don't want to reveal too much about what happens to the characters for those audience members who've never seen the show. Now, do some of your fellow casting directors listen to Killer Casting? Do you know?
Oh, I don't think yet because it's so new. We're just, I can bring on so many casting directors onto the show. I would love to do that. But the thing is, a lot of casting directors who go on podcasts, they're being interviewed. Like I would love to bring on Alexa Fogel, who cast The Wire, which is my all-time favorite show. But I don't want to just do another interview with her on how she found this actor or that. I want her to sit down and watch a show with me and talk about it, like really break it down.
Well, that's an interesting premise. You know what I mean? That's an interesting premise even of itself.
Mm-hmm. Right. So there's a lot of casting directors out there who do what I did on Criminal Minds. Like one of my good friends is Jason Kennedy, who casts for NCIS, which I would imagine a lot of people watch. So he and I have been casting killers. We've been doing killer casting for many years. And I thought it would be hilarious to sit down and talk about that. But I just don't want to do a typical interview show. There are some very big stars that I'm friends with, and I could come on and have them interview them. I don't care about that. They've already been interviewed. I want to sit down with them and say, okay, what's your favorite show? Okay, let's talk about the pilot. What do you see in that pilot? I mean, somebody like Matthew Gray Gubler, who
he'd be great.
I got very close to. He directed many episodes. Some of our biggest, most fantastic episodes, Matthew Gray Gubler directed, and he's got such an interesting eye. I mean, being in a casting session with Matthew is unlike any other casting session I've ever been in with any other director, because he'll take the camera away from me. I'm supposed to be, filming the auditioning actor. He'll take it away from me and he'll move around the room and zoom in really close and have him do it again. And he'll be like, okay, do that line again, but say it like you're a sunflower. Okay, now say it like you're a raisin. Okay, now say it like a rainstorm just happened.
Well, you don't have your umbrella. He's starting to direct. He's in his element.
He's beyond. He's a fantastic director. He's a great actor. But of course, the role of Dr. Reed is a bit of a box.
Yeah.
It's a certain kind of box he's been in. But when he's directing, he is just the goobs. I mean, I love it. I love it.
Now, for the benefit of the listener, we should probably explain in TV, the director of an episode, it's not the same director every single week.
Correct. So that is very unique. And television is really a writer's medium, and film is really a director's medium, where the writer in a television show, I mean, they're part of the family. They're there every day on everybody's script. They're weighing in. Even if they're not credited with the script, they're there in the writer's room, listening to all the drafts and giving input, et cetera, et cetera. The director, we may have never even met before. Right? So we're a show of 15 years that have been chugging along with this, a big family. And then every week a newcomer comes in to direct, and that's a really big responsibility, because you have to honor what the show is and not what you want it to be. Right. So you can't make Criminal Minds an episode of The Walking Dead, or, an episode of Friends, or whatever, you have to honor the show and yet bring a fresh take to the show. It's a really hard thing. But every director that comes for every episode, we welcome, we champion, and certain people come again and again, and you get to know their aesthetic. So I know if a certain director comes, I'm like, oh, they're going to love this kind of actor, or, oh no, they will not like this kind of actor. We kind of, and with Gubler, oh my God, he's after my heart. He loves the weirdos. He loves the outcasts. He loves the broken toys that nobody else will cast because they're just so unique. I'm like, oh, I know the exact actor that Gubler will love for this.
Right. And and for a show like Criminal Minds, that, those kind of characters are definitely part of the mix. You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. One of the most frequent questions we're asked here at Mind Over Murder is, how can I help?
Thanks to Othram, a leading forensic DNA testing lab for law enforcement, you can get involved and help solve real cases.
If you have tested at a consumer genetics company, you can contribute your data to DNAsolves.com. The process is easy and confidential. Just 2 simple steps. Your DNA might be the missing piece that helps solve the identity of an unknown person.
Then Mind Over Murder will highlight cases Othram is working on to seek your crowdfunding support for DNA testing to help solve these cold cases.
Upload your DNA profile to DNAsolves.com. It's easy, free, and confidential.
Then join Mind Over Murder as we help families find answers with Othram and DNAsolves.com. Do you like our show, Mind Over Murder, and want to create your own podcast?
Well then, let us tell you about Anchor.
First of all, it's free. And who doesn't love free, right?
I like free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer.
You can even add any song from Spotify directly to your episodes. The possibilities are endless for what you can create, whether it's music analysis, your own radio show, or something the world's never heard before.
Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more platforms.
And you can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership.
I like the sound of that. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Right here, Anchor.
Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started on your own podcast.
You can tell them Kristin and Bill from Mind Over Murder sent you. We're back here at Mind Over Murder.
Who were some of the guest actors that you were particularly excited to cast? Like, who were your casting coups?
Oh, Kristin, this is a very hard question because the actors who I think are casting coups, nobody in your audience will ever have heard of. You know, they're just my little.
Yeah, that is interesting.
They're just people that have been around forever, like Ari Gross. You'll never even know in a million years who he is, but he's been around forever. And we got him on to play an unsub, and he was so pathetic and so. I just can't even tell you how he pulled on my heartstrings, which is hard, you know.
Which one was
he? Was somebody. He was. I'll have to look up the episode, but he kidnapped girls that nobody would notice were kidnapped. He didn't kidnap the cheerleaders.
Okay.
He kidnapped the oddballs. He kidnapped the librarian, or the librarian's assistant, not even the librarian.
Okay, and, I think I remember this one.
When the mother came forth to say that her daughter was missing, like, nobody believed her because they were like, nobody would kidnap your daughter. I mean, why would they? You're poor. You're, she's not pretty. She's not, or whatever, and he would pretend to be disabled and then lure them into his car and stuff. But, Ari has had a long, long career, and I saw him in a play, a Chekhov play, like a few months before the episode, before I got the script for the episode. And I was like, oh my God, he's so amazing.
Yeah.
And he just, somebody needs to keep casting him. And it's crazy. But when he came to the table read, I was like a fangirl. And everybody's like, why are you so freaking, like, I don't freak out about like Shamar Moore, or I don't freak out about like really big stars, but somebody like Ari, who has just been grinding for decades, I love, and anybody from The Wire that I could cast, we were able to cast a few people from The Wire. I take as a personal like check, but that's me because I'm a weirdo. If you haven't figured out by now, I'm a weirdo, and I'm not your typical. I'm not a Hollywood person. I don't, buddy. I'm not a Hollywood person at all. I'm very down to earth. You can. I don't know. You guys know. So the things that impress me are different maybe than others. But I loved casting Danny Glover. I mean, that was amazing. Casting Jane Lynch. When we have the budget to be able to afford, a pricier, more well-known actor, I mean, that's always great. I mean, Sharon Lawrence did a fantastic turn for us.
I really like her.
I mean, that was so amazing. I mean, getting her was just, and that's the thing. It's like, I knew we had a role that she would love. Mm-hmm. I knew we had a role that she had not played. I'd seen her on Shameless. And I'm like, why are they wasting her on Shameless? It was such a small little arc that she had. I was like, I've got something that she will act the shit out of, and she did. So anyway.
It was tremendous.
Would people come in for, actors and agents talk about their quote? In other words, they've got a certain price level that they won't go beneath. Television changed in that a lot of terrific actors that wouldn't have done television then found themselves, there were less interesting roles in movies and that sort of thing. And so a lot of people that wouldn't do television shifted over and said, absolutely, I'll do television. Would there be situations where there'd be people you think, well, we could never afford him or her, where they actually were interested in a great story, a great role? Would they come in and work for less than their quote?
So again, this is like what we were talking about. So, okay, so I should explain. In the last year, you're not even allowed to ask for quotes anymore. Mm-hmm. You used to be able to say, okay, so-and-so, we want so-and-so, what was their quote on NCIS, or what did they get paid on, whatever. And so then we would know if we could afford them or not. Mm-hmm. You can't ask that anymore. And the agents can't say that anymore. They can't say, wow, he got $50,000 for one day. You're going to have to meet their quote. We're not allowed to do that anymore. I think it's more of a content question than a money question. At a certain point in an actor's career, they're not getting called in for the leading lady anymore. They're not getting called in for the hero anymore. And they're frustrated and they want to work. And so, of course, and television is still in its golden age, where the best roles are on TV. You can have an extended experience with a character.
Right. Right. People talk about story arc a lot.
So it's a little bit easier to approach quote unquote film actors and say, hey, you've never been able to play this. Nobody in a studio will ever cast you as this. Come here and you can play this. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, like we were talking about with C. Thomas Howell, it can totally open up a whole other career for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's the art of it. That's the kind of the fun part of where you look at all the people who are doing series now. I mean, Kevin Costner is doing a series. So many big stars are doing a series, whether it's on Netflix or other streaming services or whatever. So they're more in reach now. It's all about the material, Bill. I swear. It's not even about the money. The money is about the agent doing their agenting. It's about material. And I cast indie films that have no money, that have like $100 a day for somebody. But if it's material that an actor would never be asked to do, that matters to them. Especially, they've got all the money in the world already. They don't need to do this job for the money, but it's an amazing role that will open up a whole new audience for them, maybe a younger audience. Mm-hmm. Then that's my currency. My currency is that and not the pay.
So what are some of the projects that you're working on right now? You'd mentioned some indie films. What else is going on in Lisa's world?
I wish I could tell you everything that was going on. The weird thing is I can't.
Oh, sure. But, no, that's understandable.
COVID really, as with everyone, stopped many of the projects and many of the pilots that I was doing.
Yes.
And we'll see if they'll resume again. I was lucky enough to do a pilot with a director and writer called Taika Waititi. So if you've seen Jojo Rabbit, that's Taika. That was his, Oscar-winning directing, writing, and acting. And so I was able to do a pilot with him and Sterling Harjo, and it's all about the Native American community. And so I was able to go to Oklahoma. I went to Oklahoma and drove all around Oklahoma looking for Native American talent, whether you'd ever acted, never acted.
Really?
Woke up one morning and said, I want to act today. We saw you. I went to the biggest cities in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and then drove out to the nether regions of Oklahoma and met. The thing is, when a Native American indigenous actor comes to an audition, they don't come alone. They bring their family. They bring their parents, their grandparents, their aunties, their nieces and nephews, their sisters and brothers. It's a family. So I met hundreds of actors, but thousands of families, because it's such a big deal to be represented in a television show for indigenous actors. And it's to get a job as a series regular on a show can lift a family out of poverty for a bit. It's a big deal. And it's a very different experience auditioning Native American actors in their communities than it is being in LA and calling an agent. I mean, most of these people didn't have agents, right? And you're meeting them where they are. You're meeting their acting skills where they are, and you're helping them to be able to be themselves. That's all we want. We want them to be themselves. We want them to be authentic in these very, very authentic roles. So it was an absolute privilege for me to do this. And it made me, when I watched Tiger King like a couple months later, and I saw this person saying, Oklahoma is the meth capital of the world. I'm like, no, it's not, and that's purely based on my experience with all of these Native American families who are, I saw every kind of actor. I saw trans actors. I saw 11-year-old actors. I saw 27-year-old actors. I saw every kind of gender identity. It was just an amazing experience. And I was very protective when we did our episodes on Tiger King about casting aspersions on people in Oklahoma. So I was defending that while still acknowledging that addiction and suffering does happen in the Indigenous community. They do struggle with that, but they are not the meth capital of the world, and they should never be referred to as that. Sorry, I just need to get that out there.
Oh, no, that's good. That's fine.
Speaking of COVID, do you have any sense, are some productions moving forward with COVID precautions in place? It just seems like it would be very challenging to work. There's so many people behind the camera as opposed to the 2, 3, 4 people who are in front of the camera. There's all these other people. Are productions able to move forward in terms of film and television?
So, Bill, as a SAG-AFTRA representative yourself, you should be very proud of the union because they have been at the forefront of protecting actors and crew for anything going forward. They sent a white paper to Governor Newsom saying, this is how we can keep people safe. And what's been frustrating for me is that non-union productions have tried to go forward without those protections and trying to make actors sign these totally illegal waivers that say, if I get sick on this show, it's not the production's fault, and I have been, I know how much people want to work. Actors they need to have people around them to work, and they want to work. And I'm so afraid that, many of them in the beginning were taking non-union work that was not safe. But, in any event, SAG-AFTRA and the other unions they've had a plan that they've been doing that keeps actors, crew, everybody safe. And unfortunately, it means isolating people into something called pods. So, in the olden days, in Criminal Minds, if I wanted to go visit set, I just walk onto set and sit in a chair and watch and chitter chat and bullshit with the actors who come off set and the director and everything. So that can't happen anymore. It is very controlled, and the actor, how the actors contact each other is controlled. Everybody's tested like every 3 days. There's just a lot of oversight, and of course that adds a lot of budget, and you take that budget out of other things.
Right.
But, they're the things that are in production under, a SAG-AFTRA production is going to be very, very diligent about safety. And you see that, you see things going into production up in Vancouver, Toronto, other places in Canada. And then you'll see like in a couple weeks later, production was halted due to a COVID positive test.
Yes.
So they are really, really on top of it. And if you're Tyler Perry, you can quarantine your whole cast and in the same facility and then shoot the whole season out. But, other productions don't have that, and, they just have to do other things. So production is starting up. It has started up. It has picked up. It's not full force again, but it is coming back, and then it'll stop. That's the thing. We really have to put the fire of the virus out. Otherwise, it's going to be stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. So we are moving forward as quickly as we can. But, like me, I haven't been able to hire an assistant because I have to do everything myself. I can't be in an office with an assistant.
Oh, that's right.
It just doesn't make financial sense, and it's not safe. I don't need an assistant because I'm not having live auditions where an assistant would have to be shepherding actors back and forth or doing anything. I just do it all myself. So it's a different world, but hey, we can do this.
Well, I think we're going to have to. I mean, there's just, and it's funny. I mean, I want all of us to get through this thing, but my brother Richard, my older brother, is an epidemiologist, so he's been studying disease outbreaks for 40 years. And I remember he said to us last January when this thing broke, he said to me, "It's going to be a year or two before this thing gets sorted out."
But Bill, we can't trust scientists. Bill, we can't trust what scientists say. Come on. We all know better. We gotta hack this, man. I'm an American. I don't need an epidemiologist. I'm an American. Okay?
Well, it's funny. I trust the scientists I'm related to.
Right.
Our reality now is, on a going forward basis, is that we're all going to have to figure out how to make this thing work. I'm not working in film and television now, but obviously I still have a lot of friends that are. And I am very proud of the work that SAG-AFTRA and the labor unions have done to protect all the workers. But it is difficult when you think about the logistics of bringing potentially dozens in a small production or hundreds in a large production of people together to allow them to work. And as you were saying, the kind of freedom that you would have had as a casting director to come and go, those kind of things are so limited now. And then, of course, it's funny, I've been watching commercials, and I'm still surprised how few commercials actually are reflecting the reality that we're all living with, which is by now, we ought to actually have more people wearing masks and being socially distanced in a commercial. And we're not seeing that very much. Now, when I watch the news, and of course, we've been watching a lot of news lately, you see a lot of folks on camera with masks. But when I leave the house today, I'm going to have a mask on. I'm going to go to the grocery store, and I'm going to be doing everything I can to be careful. And yet in a situation where you're presenting a production that's supposed to be a timeless story, it's not likely that the story is going to be built around a bunch of people wearing masks.
Well, I don't know about that. Yeah, no, so this is something that writers' rooms have, because my brother-in-law writes for Riverdale. I've got plenty of friends who are writing for all different shows. And this is something they're struggling with. Like, do we resume and reflect what we had, or do we resume and reflect what is? And I think a lot of shows are trying to struggle with, all right, is a mask just part of our daily thing? Or, is taking your temperature, like, do we incorporate it just normally into, not like spotlight it, but just it's part of life. Resume as life is? Or do we want to show audiences something that makes them forget about how life is?
Yeah.
Now, the jury is out on that. You probably need both, I mean, it's not, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, we were literally the first family on our block to wear masks.
Right.
Okay. And we felt so stupid. I didn't even have masks. I had napkins. I had cloth napkins that I tripled up and put around my sons when they went for their morning walk. And we felt like, we being
felt like an idiot.
Idiots? We did. And now it's like, I don't even see it anymore. No. I don't even notice if I go to a restaurant, socially distanced, I wear my mask, the server has their shield and their mask on. Right. I don't even
you don't even see it anymore.
Normal.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm happy to be there to support the restaurant. I'm happy that they're working. I'm happy, you know what I mean? I'm just happy that we can be as safe as possible and still do our lives.
Sure.
So I think that shows are trying to figure that out, how to incorporate that, just smoothly and still have life, because life is still going on. People are still, having lawsuits and doctor's appointments and love stories and hate stories. Like, that's still happening. And how do we reflect that? That's the big challenge.
Sure. Hey, I wanted to ask you a casting question. How do actors react when, for example, when you were doing Criminal Minds, when they come in, let's just say, and they read for a part, let's say it's a law enforcement person or an attorney or whatever, and, they do a good job and you like some of what they're doing, but have you ever then turned around and said to them, You're terrific, but what I'd really like you to do is I'd like you to play a serial killer instead of the attorney that you came in to audition for. Has that ever happened, and how did people react?
Oh, they don't give. I mean, they just as soon come in. I mean, no, a job is a job. They want the job. They don't care what it is. And in fact, they're probably like elated because they always get called in for the doctor.
Right.
Or they always get called in for the lawyer. But somebody is seeing them in a more open way. And it's like, oh no, you would be great. Actually, there is a great story about that I tell people, that I brought in this wonderful actor, Brady Smith, and he came in for the bad guy. Mm-hmm. You know, he came in for the unsub, and he read the role, and the director said, you know, you're great in this, but could you step outside? Here are the sides for the good guy in, the hero.
Explain what the sides are, please.
Oh, sorry. So sides, they're the scene. They're the scene from the script that is pulled out of the script that you audition for. When you audition for a role, you don't read the whole script. You don't even get the whole script. You just get the scenes that you appear in.
Right.
So that's what you audition
with your lines. And
with your lines,
I'm not even sure what the origin of the expression sides is. Everybody uses that expression.
I'm sure it's Shakespearean. I'm sure it's from Shakespeare. You know, the Shakespearean actors didn't get the whole script. They only got they don't even know what the whole
part. Right.
Scene was. It's like, this is my part. Okay, you get shoved out on stage, read your part, and that's it, from the folio. But anyway.
Right.
Back to Brady. So we gave him like 7 pages, which is a huge amount of pages. Mostly it's 2 pages to audition. We give him 7 pages and say, okay, go out to the waiting room, work on this, and come back when you feel okay. So normally actors get a day or 2 when they get the sides, when they get the scene they're auditioning with. So poor guy, he gets it and has to turn right around, So he comes back in and he goes from being the black hat guy to being the white hat guy. And he comes in and he kills it. Not only does he kill it, he's off book, which means he memorized 7 pages of script in the waiting room, which is so hard to do because you're so freaked out. You're so distracted. And I think he changed his shirt in the waiting room. Like he had like a nice
a different
shirt that he did, which is so smart, and he killed it and he got the role. And it was like a role that recurred. So that's money, baby. That's like,
so you come back.
Mortgage payment.
Right.
So a recur means that you come back for more than one episode, and cha-ching, we're in syndication. Where you turn on the TV right now, Criminal Minds is on
somewhere.
So
somewhere.
That's a substantial amount towards his retirement, towards people seeing him. So anyway, yes, that happens, and it's a happy, happy day when that happens because we just want to give somebody a job. That's what we want. So that was great.
Kristin, last questions. We're almost at time. We have a few minutes.
Yeah, let me double check and make sure we've asked everything. I feel like we have.
I hope this is interesting to your. I mean, this isn't much about.
This is great.
One thing your listeners may appreciate is when you are casting a show about murder. We truly don't want to make it like torture porn. That's not our goal. We're there to represent the victims. Now, there is a certain amount of our audience. They like to be scared. Mm-hmm. They like to be freaked out. They like horror. They like the nitty gritty of crime. But I think what brings people back again and again are the victim stories, the actors that I cast who are the survivors, right? A lot of times in our show, you don't even know the victim. Like she'll be like a female jogging in the trailer and then, she'll be, something will happen. You won't even know what happens. Yeah. And the rest of the episode is devoting to finding out what happened to her and bringing justice to the crime that happened to her. And the rest of the episode will be the survivors who recount who she was. And the series regulars, the BAU, who recount the victimology and who she was. And that's, I think, what is important. And casting those roles of the grieving husband, the grieving sister, the mothers, the survivors, those are the hardest things to cast, because those actors come in and they bring it. I mean, they bring it. And they relive whatever they're reliving for the victim, for the audience to feel. And that's something I'm very proud of that our show delivers.
And I think that's a great point, because I do have friends who do not watch shows like CSI or Criminal Minds because they feel like it's making murder a form of entertainment. And it's good to know that you guys are aware of that and that you are doing your best to be as respectful as possible of the fact that behind every crime, there is a grieving family, there is a victim, and there are people who want to see justice done.
And, Bill and Kristin, we just did an interview with someone who heads a national victims advocacy service. And, the one thing she said is 95% of offenders, right? 95% of the people who kill and who torture and who are in prison, they were victims.
Yes, exactly.
They learned it from somewhere. And in our show, many times, and Jim can talk about this at length, when you look at a serial killer, you're looking at a damaged person.
Right. It's learned.
That doesn't excuse them from their crime. It does not excuse them from their actions. But we have to understand that. We have to understand what the making of a murderer means. And we have to stop that. We have to preempt that. So in many of the psychopaths that we cast on Criminal Minds, I look for that. I look for the human within the psychopath. And we pay tribute to that many times on Criminal Minds, where we'll show a flashback of, the offender as a child and the things that they have to go through. And by the way, casting a child to portray that, that is not fun.
Wow, yeah.
And I've had to make many children cry. And
you horrible thing, you.
I'm terrible. Oh my God. But I try to protect them. I try to tell them, no, you're not being tortured or abused. You're seeing a scary spider, or you're seeing a scary dog, or something like that. Wow. But, it's all connected. And I really hope that people listening know that those of us on the production side put a great deal of thought into this, and we don't see it as torture porn. We don't see it as exploitation, and you might, and that's understood, and bless you, God bless you. But we really have a different point of view. Hi, buddy. I know we're gonna go. Sorry,
and
Buddy.
let's
Poor
not
Buddy. He's been so good.
He has been so good.
I think Buddy has enjoyed this podcast, and
I think so too.
Buddy, for those of you that are listening to this episode, he showed up in our last episode. He is a foster dog, and there he is, and he's been Lisa's constant companion throughout this entire podcast.
An emergency foster, please, folks. If you can be a foster, please do. It's so worth it. And poor Buddy was in an abusive house, and they called me last night, and you can't say no, and all he wants is love. So why not?
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for taking the time to hang out with us, to fill us in on life in Criminal Minds and on all of your doings, both on the podcast sphere and in the casting sphere as well. We can't thank you enough for spending time with us.
And we encourage our listeners. Thank you. We encourage our listeners to be looking for you on your two podcasts now, Real Crime Profile and Killer Casting.
Thank you. And I want you guys to come on Killer Casting, because I want to know what you're watching besides Criminal Minds. I want to come on to Killer Casting. Please subscribe to Killer Casting so you can catch Bill and Kristin come on and talk about shows and help me break them down. And that would be so much fun.
That would be a ton of fun. We would love that.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.